and welcome to the third hour of American Agenda. I'm Bob Sellers.
And I'm Heather Childers. We are now joined by our family of co-hosts, former chairwoman for the Nevada State GOP, Amy Tarkanian, co-chair for Project 21 and host of Stacy on the Right, Stacy Washington, and CEO of Point Bridge Capital and former Ted Cruz National Finance Chair, Hal Lambert. Welcome to everyone.
All right, President Biden proposing a massive $6 trillion budget for the 2022 fiscal year with plans to invest in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and extra, just about everything.
Extra efforts.
He claims that it will boost the middle class. How does Mr. Biden plan on paying for it? That's a different question. Increase taxes on corporations and on high earners. The budget would push federal spending to the highest levels since World War II on a percentage basis and, of course, on an absolute basis higher than ever before. Let's bring in our panel. I'll start with you, Stacy. Your thoughts on this?
Well, a quarter of the GDP, that is quite an outlay. And I think Americans who are right now receiving checks from the Biden administration, because there seems to be this big push to make sure that every American has a check coming from the government for something, whether it's for, their children, for universal preschool. They're trying to distract Americans away from their policies. So everyone gets a check and you just kind of spend your money, gratefully so, and you don't notice that the government wants to take your guns, has a wide open southern border, is basically allowing the rule of law to be demolished because we have certain people who aren't prosecuted for crimes, people who entered the country illegally, and then you have people who, basically did nothing and are being investigated and called at work and subjected to FBI interviews with the people who were just in D.C. on January 6th, as opposed to those who actually stormed the Capitol. So there's an inequality in the rule of law that they want to buy you off to accept. And I'm asking Americans to say no to that.
Yeah, Heather, it seems like people are on a sugar high. Those that have gotten stimulus checks, those that have gotten enhanced unemployment, paid more to stay home perhaps than they would on a job, although the idea of a job is that you advance and eventually get paid more. It's not supposed to work like this, right?
No, it's not supposed to work like this. And eventually you come off of that sugar high, and that's going to happen. And everyone's going to realize where we are and how the spending by the Biden administration is impacting each and every one of us. And perhaps those who are impacted the most are, in fact, lower income Americans and not higher earned wages, because what he was specifically talking about today in terms of, investments in the middle class, he said, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, overhauling the tax code to favor work, not wealth. But all of this is going to work in the opposite direction, as we were discussing with some of our economic experts earlier.
Yeah, and how first quarter, 6.4% growth. We're having more than that right now. We're getting that V-shaped economy recovery that then President Trump, predicted. That's what we're getting. Why are we going to add trillions on top of that?
Well, the reason they want to add trillions on top of it is because they don't want to let any crisis go to waste, and they want to do the top-down government approach, pay back their cronies with expenditures. It's totally unnecessary. As you just said, 6.4% GDP growth. If the federal government would just get out of the way and these blue states that are still partially closed would just open up, we could take off and be just fine. We don't need to spend all this money. And when they talk about investing, the government's not a great investor. I mean, we saw this when it was under Obama, and they were spending all this money on, Solyndra and all these green deals that went bankrupt, and they spent billions of dollars of taxpayer money to their cronies that went out of business. We don't need that. We don't need that happening. And, one thing I want to address really quickly is they talk about, we're going to pay for this by taxing the wealthy. And they've mentioned, 650 billionaires whose net worth went up $4 trillion. Look, those people aren't going to pay taxes if they don't want to pay taxes. And it's just that simple. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't need to sell a single share of stock. He can put all of his cash in municipal bonds. He doesn't have to pay himself any salary. He could pay zero next year. So to say we're going to tax these billionaires is just not real. It's not realistic. They're going to tax the middle class is what they're going to do. They're going to come after the middle class for this, and that's where this is headed.
Yeah, and Amy, you've also got the prospect of inflation. We have some now, and some of it may go away because part of it's been getting back to work, and there's a demand for a lot of things that were pent up. But once we get through that, we throw this on top of it. Heather and I were talking about this before with Stephen Moore. Inflation affects the people, especially on the low end of the economic scale, even more than the top, because like Hal said, they'll figure out a way not to overpay taxes. They'll shift the assets here and there. Inflation gets you.
Right. Well, and let me break it down very simply. The fact that this administration is technically bribing people with the stimulus checks, trying to make it seem like they care about you. That is further from the case, because you mentioned a sugar high. What happens when you come down from a sugar high? You crash. And that's exactly what we're going to see happen. So, for example, let's take the so-called COVID relief bill, okay? The American relief bill, where we were each given $1,400 in stimulus check money. Now, if you talked about inflation. Gas is part of that equation, unfortunately. And in some areas, it's as high as more than $1 a gallon. So let's just say your car has 30 gallons that it can take. Let's just say it's $1 higher than what it normally is. So you times 30 times 1 times 52 weeks, that is 1,560. And there goes your stimulus check just for your gas. And so they don't want the American people just to see what kind of a sham this is that they're pulling over you.
Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, well, let's bring up some of what the president did have to say and hear from him specifically what he thinks we need to do for the economy and the middle class.
Even my Republican friends in Congress, not a single one of them voted for the rescue plan. I'm not going to embarrass anyone, but I have here a list of how back in their districts they're bragging about the rescue plan. They touted the restaurant revitalization fund. They touted the fact that we're in a situation where they're dealing with touted grants to community health care centers. Touted, I mean, some people have no shame. But I'm happy. I'm happy they know that it benefited their constituents.
All right, so Hal, that's a different portion of what he had to say today. Do you think that that's right, though? Are Republicans out bragging about, the plans that Biden has put in place?
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's talking about there, but I will say this. Look, there were parts of the bill that the Republicans supported. The big hangup was on this extended unemployment benefit that was going to go on and on and on, which is what they did. And that was the biggest hangup on the bill. And then, of course, the size of the stimulus amount that was sent out, the $1,400. Those were the two big caveats that Republicans had problems with. The other things they didn't necessarily have a problem with. So, he can talk about it all day long, but at the end of the day, that bill was passed. Republicans did not support it because of the two things I just said. And quite frankly, we didn't need those two things. It's kept people from going back to work, and it's kept the economy from growing as fast as it would otherwise. Employers can't find employees. We all know that. And so, look, it actually is hurting the economic growth. So I don't think there's anything to be proud of when he's standing up there grinning like that.
Yeah, he was touting how many jobs have been created, a record number in his first 100 days or whatever it is. But that's part of the recovery as we come out of this shutdown. And also, it would have been even better if people hadn't been paid to stay home with enhanced unemployment plus stimulus checks that end up paying them more to stay home than to go to work.
It was only, 266,000 in April jobs created.
Yeah,
and it
jobs
could have
created.
Been significantly
and they
more.
thought it was going to be 1 million.
Right.
And you can't say people are stupid. Congress is stupid. The administration is stupid for giving them an incentive to stay home. They're smart enough, they know if they don't get that to stay home, they'll have to go find a job, which eventually is better for everybody, including them. All right? That's the way it works, right? All right. Thanks, panel. Coming up, if you were to post a claim that COVID-19 came from that lab in Wuhan, your post on Facebook would be deleted. So now, why is Facebook flip-flopping on that issue? More of American Agenda after this.